Hybrid technology has often been decreed too pricey for the supermini segment, but Renault has attempted to democratise it with this car, the Clio E-Tech Hybrid. It's a little pricier than an ordinary Clio, but the French brand hopes you'll be impressed by the key WLTP figures here: 64.2 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 98 grams per kilometre of CO2. Plus, there's an EV option that gives limited all-electric driving range. At last, Europe has a hybrid-powered supermini to take on the Asian brands, and it's this one, Renault's Clio E-Tech Hybrid. There's an awful lot of technology to explain here, but the bottom line is that the French manufacturer is offering a really credible alternative to diesel power more affordably than any other hybrid supermini maker has managed to do before. And there's a real need for that. Europe now has the world's strictest emissions regulations, requiring a 95 grams per kilometre across-the-board range average for small cars, which it simply isn't possible for a manufacturer to meet without electrifying a large number of its engines. Prior to 2020, all that was available in that regard in the small car market was a Toyota Yaris self-charging hybrid and a handful of EV models that hardly anyone bought. That has to change, and it's going to. An obvious route to driving down your brand's supermini emissions average is to churn out full battery versions, which is why Peugeot has launched its E208, Vauxhall has the Corsa-e, and Renault sells its Zoe. But these cars are getting on for £30,000 in a market that expects to buy a small car for way less than that. So other solutions have to be found. Solutions like this, the Clio E-Tech Hybrid. Unlike the E-Tech PHEV hybrid versions of Renault's slightly larger Captur and Megane models, this one is a hybrid of the self-charging sort rather than being a plug-in. But thanks to its F1-influenced engine technology, it's still capable of diesel-like returns that closely match those of its two close supermini segment full hybrid rivals, the Honda Jazz and the Toyota Yaris. Those two Japanese brands have been making hybrid small cars for years. This is Renault's first. So can this Clio really threaten the established competition at its first attempt? Well, if it can, every small car customer should sit up and take notice. So let's put this car to the test. The Clio E-Tech Hybrid feels as ordinary behind the wheel as it'll look on the high street. There's an automatic gearbox, of course. It's a hybrid, so you have to have that. But here there are no weird controls or confusing buttons to press. Mind you, it is a little strange to start things up to the sound of silence. This model fires up solely on electric power, and it'll stay that way until you exceed 10 miles an hour. Once you get going, the petrol engine inevitably chips in, but in the course of give and take suburban driving, this car is capable of intermittently running for short periods solely in all-electric form. In fact, Renault claims in urban driving that's what happens 80% of the time, which is what differentiates this car's full hybrid powertrain from that of the mild hybrid models that other supermini brands will now want to sell you. We had initially thought that this French maker would install its plug-in hybrid E-Tech powertrain into this car, logically because this is what's fitted to the hybrid versions of the company's mechanically identical Captur small crossover model. But that would have added too many pounds, both in terms of weight and in terms of price, to this Clio. So the same basic E-Tech 1.6 litre self-charging petrol power plant is here, configured rather differently. Renault makes much of the way that the design of this car's engine borrows from its F1 racing technology. Now, we've heard this sort of thing before from motorsport manufacturers, but here it happens to be true. A modern hybrid F1 engine is extremely compact, and it uses two electric motors, one recovering heat waste and the other recycling kinetic energy from braking, which charge the battery and provide power boosts. Now, these are mated to a multi-mode clutchless dog gearbox. That's an auto transmission so named because of the long dog-ear shaped teeth that ring each of its cogs and can tolerate rapid violent shifts. This Clio uses exactly the same tech, but with a focus on efficiency rather than on outright power. The engine's so compact that Renault has been able to package two electric motors alongside it beneath the bonnet. One of these sits on top of the gearbox, puts out 20 horsepower and acts as a high voltage generator, and it's tasked with starting the car and smoothing the gear changes. Most of the work in assisting the engine though is done by the second bigger motor, which is attached to the rear of the transmission casing. That puts out 48 horsepower and it's there to help the combustion power plant propel the car once it's underway. Both motors are powered by a tiny 1.2 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack located beneath the boot floor, and the whole powertrain is mated to an auto gearbox of the race-style clutchless dog variety we just mentioned. The total system output here is rather different to Fernando Alonso's though, of course. Instead of 850 braked horses, think 140 HP. But the whole setup proves in the clearest possible way that race tech really can be translated into sensible road car technology if you try hard enough with it. So how does it all work in practice? Well, the straightforward performance stats: 62 from rest in 9.9 seconds en route to 112 miles an hour maximum. They don't really give you much idea of just how lively this electrified Clio actually feels in day-to-day driving. Its enthusiastic Gallic vibe comes courtesy of the powertrain's generous reserves of mid-range pulling power. The petrol engine musters 144 newton meters of it, while the bigger electric motor generates 205 newton meters, and the smaller high voltage starter generator delivers an additional 50 newton meters. The result is excellent acceleration, especially at speeds between 50 and 75 miles an hour, where the battery assists with sharper responses than a conventional petrol or diesel could offer. That enables a 50 to 75 miles an hour time of just 6.9 seconds. For this kind of enthusiastic progress, you're going to have to have selected the most dynamic of the three drive modes on offer, Sport, but you're not going to want to do that too often for fear of decimating the frugal fuel returns which would have prompted you to choose this car in the first place. For that, you'll most of the time want to stay in my sense. That's the hybrid setting, which blends the petrol and electric motor output for maximum economy. Or possibly in the eco setting, which uses a more measured mapping of the accelerator pedal and adapted gear changing for greater economy. In town, you might want to select EV. That prioritizes battery electric drive up to about 27 miles an hour, providing there's sufficient charge. There is also a further brake setting on the gear lever, which increases throttle lift-off electrical regeneration, although not to the point where lifting your right foot results in the kind of abrupt retardation that you'd find in an EV. For moments when you might need a sudden burst of acceleration, the throttle has a kick-down function, and that brings all the power sources into play, and it suspends the EV mode if it's been selected. Efficiency, though, is this car's primary purpose, and drive satisfaction here lies not with hurling the thing about, but by staying within the sweet spot of the complicated powertrain's capabilities. There's certainly a lot going on here, as you'll gather if you can be bothered to keep an eye on the instrument panel's graphical display. A triangulation of battery, e-motor and engine, which shows the hyperactive system's flow of energy. One moment the engine could be powering the wheels via the fixed ratio gearbox, and then the main e-motor might take over, and then both might work in tandem, and then you might relax the accelerator and find that all of a sudden the energy is being harvested. It's quite satisfying to interact with all of this by keeping the digital power meter in blue for regenerative braking or green for eco and electric driving, and seeing the EV light flicker on or off as battery power eases in and out of the process. If you're testing this car having tried its two main hybrid supermini rivals, the Honda Jazz and the Toyota Yaris, which would be sensible, then the main thing that you'll notice with this Clio is that its auto gearbox feels far more responsive. It lacks that rubber band style lag which still characterizes the belt-driven CVT auto transmissions that those two Japanese contenders have to have. Otherwise, the drive experience here is just as in any other Clio, so the ride is relaxed and generally comfy, the steering is light and pretty effortless. In fact, if no one briefed you on the extent of the complex technology in play here, you'd probably never guess it, which is what's so impressive about this car. Familiar packaging, clothing a general level of sophistication far beyond anything that you might ever have expected to find in a supermini, especially perhaps in a European one. But times are changing, and this car proves that Renault, more quickly than some of its volume rivals, is changing with them. Apart from the badge work, there are no visual differences to mark the Clio E-Tech Hybrid out from standard variants in the range, which means the look is just as with any other Mark V Clio, a slightly more expressively styled design than others in this model line. If you really do want your neighbours to notice the eco-friendliness of your choice here, then your dealer will offer you the optional Hybrid Blue Pack, which features blue exterior detailing across the front grille, on the lower edges of the doors and the rear bumper, and in the centres of the alloy wheels. But you don't really need any of that because there's plenty here to catch the eye as it is. Here at the front, sculpted ribs on the bonnet flow down into this wide central grille, and LED tusks curve out from the full LED headlamps in a C-shaped stylistic flourish that one writer reckoned reminded him of a fairground version of Salvador Dali's moustaches. There's certainly a bit more overtaking presence. This top RS line variant gets a specific front bumper, which sees this gunmetal painted F1 style blade curve over this beehive style lower grille. And from the side, well, it's possible you may not initially notice that this, the only body style on offer, is a 5-door hatch. Those matte black rear door handles are, after all, rather artfully hidden in the C-pillar, giving the silhouette a sportier 3-door look. The total body length of just over 4 metres is pretty typical for a car in this segment, but stylist Laurent van der Acker has added plenty of neat touches, subtle air deflectors around the front wheel arches, and for ritzier variants like this one, chrome trimming around the glass house, at which point you might pick up the subtle E-Tech badge on the B-pillar. Wheel rim sizes see 16-inch alloys fitted on base models, with smarter 17 inches on upper spec variants like this one. The curvy creativity continues at the rear too, where these tail lights feature a C-shaped 3D illuminating signature. A long, thin brake light is fitted at the top of the tailgate glass, but of course, what's more important is the stuff you can't see. This Mark V model's stiff and sophisticated CMFB, Common Module Family B segment chassis structure, fashioned from high elastic limit steel and designed from the outset to accommodate this electrified drivetrain. Let's take a seat up front. When we first sampled this Mark V Clio's considerably upgraded cabin, we pronounced it to be unbettered in the segment for style and quality feel, and our opinion hasn't changed. For this hybrid model, it gains E-Tech badging and subtle detailing running the width of the interior in the air vents and around the gear lever. With S-Edition trim, you can specify a unique light cabin environment too. Otherwise, the ambiance is much as you'd find it in any other well-specified Clio, with soft touch trimming, tactile touch points, smart piano key switches and supportive enveloping seats. There is also a distinctly Audi-esque feel, which you notice particularly with this fascia-wide ventilation strake and with the circular ventilation dials, which sit midway down the centre stack. The need to incorporate various extra E-functions into the EasyLink portrait format centre dash screen means it must be at least 7 inches in size with a Clio Hybrid, and ideally you get yourself a trim level that features this larger 9.3-inch monitor, the one we have in this test car. This adds a finishing touch to what Renault's tried to do here. It feels satisfyingly sophisticated as you poke and pinch and swipe your way through all sorts of menus for things like navigation, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring, apps, multimedia options and a decent quality DAB audio system. Plusher models like this one also allow you to use this monitor to set various ambient lighting profiles. You can choose from white, blue, green, red, purple, sky blue, yellow and orange shades, and they change the colour of the classy LED strips that feature around the gear lever and in the door pulls. The instrument binnacle can also be quite colourful because you have to have virtual dials with a Clio Hybrid. That's so the various extra eDrive readouts can be incorporated. These sit within this 7-inch colour screen. Now this is designed to change in shade and design layout on most models fitted with multi-sense drive system settings. If you'd like this TFT display to cover the full width of the binnacle as it would do in a larger and more expensive modern design, then an even larger 10-inch instrument binnacle screen, that's the largest in the segment, can be fitted at the very top of the range on request. What else? Well, build quality from the Turkish factory is okay, but the fit and finish doesn't quite have the feel of longevity you'd get in this car's Japanese rivals. Cabin design ergonomics, they're pretty good too, although you do occasionally get screen reflections. We'd prefer to have seen a proper knob for audio volume rather than these two fiddly screen buttons. Fortunately, there are more easily accessible volume controls on the steering column here. To the left of the column sits the starter still, which once again unfortunately hasn't been moved to the right of it to suit our market. Still, at least Renault no longer buries the cruise control button down by the handbrake. That is now positioned instead on the steering wheel, where it ought to have been all the time. The brand hasn't followed its PSA group rivals by adding in an optional head-up display, but everything you really need falls to hand easily enough, particularly the EasyLink infotainment screen. Now this is canted slightly towards the driver for ease of reach, and it offers limited voice activation for things like simple addresses, for phone numbers and for track selection. As for practicalities, well, our testers had mixed feelings here. As with so many French cars, the glove box is halved in size by an awkwardly shaped fuse box. PSA group cars suffer from that failing too. It really is about time that the Gallic brand sorted that issue out. You get a useful bank of connectivity ports in a deep well in front of the gear stick, a 12-volt, an aux-in and twin USBs, plus space for a wireless charging mat. But it can't all be shut away with a cover, so you'll have to leave your smartphone powering up in front of prying eyes. Renault has forgotten to fit an overhead sunglasses compartment, and there is no provision for anything like under seat or passenger footwell storage. But on the plus side, the door pockets, they are of a reasonable size, and you get ticket clips in the sun visors. Plus there are twin cup holders and a coin tray down by the what would normally be a conventional handbrake, along with a decently sized bin just behind. On top models, a central armrest with storage is either standard or optional, and that comes as part of an extra cost storage pack, which also gives you a floating console and an electric parking brake like we have here. As for all-round visibility, well, rear three-quarter vision can be occasionally problematic when you're reversing, which won't be good news for buyers of the base Play trim level, because that is the only one in the range that has to do without rear parking sensors. You have to stretch right up towards the top of the range to get a standard reversing camera, although if you really need something like that to manoeuvre a car that's this small into an averagely sized parking bay, it really might be time to consult an optician. A 360-degree bird's eye view camera can be added at the top of the range. Frontwards visibility on this Clio is not too bad despite this rather chunky A-pillar, because the screen and the front side windows are quite large. And there's plenty of seat height and steering column adjustability too. Let's pull back this disguised C-pillar door handle and take a seat in the back. Now, we weren't especially impressed by the space provided back here when we first tested the conventional version of this model, and we're still not, although at least the hybrid system has been packaged in a way that doesn't detract further from the knee and leg and headspace available. One tallish adult can just about sit behind another, but you wouldn't want to be doing that for very long. Room for knees and legs is at something of a premium in here. Headroom isn't great either, and that's thanks to the somewhat swept-back roofline. As one writer pointed out, overall it's rather more Asterix than Obelix, but does that matter, given that for the majority of buyers, these rear seats will be used only occasionally for adults and more regularly for children? Well, only you can decide that. There are no versatile seat-based gymnastics like you get in rival Honda Jazz, but Renault provides seat-back pockets, reasonably sized door bins, a coin recess in the door pull and overhead coat hooks. The comma-shaped front seat headrests improve your view forward, plus there's a reasonably low central transmission tunnel that'll make the carriage of three small to medium folk a little easier. Isofix child seat fastenings feature on the outer two seats, and there is easy access to the bin behind the handbrake if you have stuff you need to stash away. In this top-spec RS line model, there's some nice trimming to take your mind off the rather compact surroundings back here, with twin-coloured door stitching and red trimming for the upholstery and for the seat belts. We'll finish with a look at cargo space. The standard Clio atones for its somewhat restricted rear seat surroundings by somehow managing to serve up the largest boot in the supermini segment. Well, you don't get that here. The usual 391 litre capacity falls to 301 litres in this case, thanks to battery pack positioning beneath the cargo area floor. Still, that is only 3 litres less than you get in a Honda Jazz, and it's 15 litres more than you get in a Toyota Yaris. Otherwise, it's as you'd get on any other Clio. There is quite a high boot lip to lug your stuff over, and you do have to do without an adjustable height boot floor, but 4 tie-down points are provided, along with a couple of bag hooks, and unlike in a rival Honda Jazz, there's enough underfloor space here to add in a spare wheel. One day we'll come across a supermini fitted out with a properly flexible 40-20-40 split backrest, but that day hasn't yet come, so this Clio gets the usual 60-40 split affair, which when it's pushed forward frees up 1,054 litres of capacity across an almost flat load floor. It's at this point that you can begin to understand Renault's rationale for not equipping this car with the kind of plug-in hybrid engine that you'll find in the company's Clio-based Capture small SUV. With PHEV tech, this would probably have been at minimum a £23,000 car. As it is, prices for this Clio E-Tech Hybrid from launch started at around £20,000, and that was the case at the time of this test in spring 2021. In terms of the price premium over a conventionally engined Clio, think about £2,400 more than a Clio TCE 100 petrol and around £1,500 more than a Clio DCI 85 diesel. As with an ordinary Clio, there is a choice of 4 main trim levels: Play, Iconic, S Edition, or as in this case, RS Line. There's a £1,000 walk-up fee between the first 3 grades, then a further £500 on top of the cost of an S Edition variant if you want the sporty RS Line trim we're trying here. So, from launch anyway, a £20,000 to £22,500 supermini. That might be a little more than you might have expected to budget for this class of car, and you might well be a little bit resentful about having to find those sorts of figures unless you really compare apples with apples. After all, Ford will sell you a so-called hybrid 5-door version of their Fiesta for around £18,500, and hybrid versions of the Kia Rio and the Hyundai i20 can be had for even less. But these are what the industry calls mild hybrid superminis, and that means that they don't have fully electrified engines, which at times can run solely on battery power. All mild hybrid tech does is it gives you a little extra battery under the front seat that boosts acceleration a bit, runs a stop-start system, and doesn't ultimately make a massive amount of difference to those all-important overall running cost figures. Which is why a proper full hybrid supermini like this one will cost you more. Yes, more to the tune of what Renault is asking here. Now, there are only 2 full hybrid rivals to this Clio E-Tech in the supermini segment, and those are the Toyota Yaris and the Honda Jazz. And it's those 2 small hatches that you should also be considering if this car here has taken your interest. Toyota Yaris pricing, well, that's very similar to that of this Renault, but do bear in mind that the Yaris has a slightly smaller boot. A base spec Jazz might save you around £500 over a base spec Clio E-Tech Hybrid, but further up the range, there's virtually nothing in it, and this Renault is slightly cheaper to run. By the way, bear in mind, if you need a bit of extra cabin versatility, that E-Tech hybrid versions of Renault's Clio-based Capture small SUV don't only come with pricey plug-in tech. For a much more affordable price, you can also get the Capture with the same non-plug-in, self-charging full hybrid engine that features here. So that's covered the direct competition. For reference though, it might be worth briefing you on how much it would cost to trade up to the next level of supermini electrification, and that's the one for full battery-powered zero-emission BEV models like the Peugeot E208, the Vauxhall Corsa-e and Renault's own Zoe. Now for these, you'll generally be paying in the £26,000 to £30,000 bracket, depending on the trim level that you want. But then you will be afflicted with the scourge of range anxiety as you drive with one eye on your rapidly depleting electric-only mileage capability between charges. A typical Clio E-Tech hybrid customer won't want that. Ultimately, most buyers for this car will be people who once would have chosen an upper spec, conventionally powered combustion engine supermini, but who are now minded to put the price premium that they once would have devoted to a higher level of trim instead towards a greener dose of engine technology. Now, if that is you and you're ready to make the switch to a hybrid, then, as we said earlier, do make absolutely sure that you know what you're getting. And bear in mind that if you are comparing against something conventional, that an ordinary combustion engine supermini would only be directly comparable to this Renault when it was fitted with an extra cost auto gearbox. Auto transmission is of course an integral part of the Clio E-Tech system. If, having considered that, you find yourself increasingly attracted by what this Renault has to offer, then you'll want to know exactly how generous the brand has been when it comes to these standard specifications. So let's take a look at that now. Now, the fundamentals here don't change with trim. All Clio hybrid variants use the same self-charging 1.6 litre E-Tech petrol-electric power plant with that auto gearbox we just mentioned, and all get Eco, MySense and Sport driving modes and a range of dashboard e-tools which allow you to get the most from it. All Clio hybrids also get the same complete level of camera safety provision, but we'll get to that in a minute. Entry-level Play trim at the foot of the range gives you most of the features that you'll really need, including the brand's EasyLink touchscreen infotainment technology, and that's provided via a centrally mounted 7-inch display that gives you Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring. A further 7-inch TFT screen features in the instrument cluster. Other Play spec features include full LED Pure Vision headlights, power folding mirrors, a Fatima immobiliser, air conditioning, cruise control with a speed limiter, comfort spec front seats with extra side support, and 16-inch Amicitia Flex steel wheels. If that's still a bit hair shirt for you, then mid-range iconic spec adds a few niceties. Things like 16-inch Filia diamond cut alloy wheels, LED front fog lights, dark tinted rear side and tailgate glass, rear parking sensors, keyless keycard entry and a leather stitched steering wheel. Need more? Then your next up is S Edition trim, which builds on iconic spec with larger 17-inch Viva Stella grey alloy wheels, auto headlamps and wipers, headlights with auto high beam control, a reversing camera and front parking sensors. Inside in an S Edition model there's climate control, a front armrest with storage, illuminated vanity mirrors and rear electric windows. Plus you get a greater dose of Renault screen technology in the form of a larger 9.3-inch version of the EasyLink central display. As we mentioned earlier, this RS line spec level tops the range off. Mildly more dynamic touches include sport-style bumpers, 17-inch RS line diamond cut alloy wheels, chromed side markers and a sports lower front grille. Plus there's signature LED C-shaped front and rear lighting and the chromed side window surround. Inside, the RS line interior gives you red inserts for the seat upholstery, the air vents and the gear lever surround. Plus there's an RS leather steering wheel, aluminium pedals, a dark roof lining and an electronic handbrake. On to options. Now your starting point here should be the various packs on offer, although not all are offered with every trim grade. For example, you have to have RS line trim to get the two packs that we have fitted here. The luxury pack, which gives you RS line leather heated front seats and passenger seat height adjustment, and the storage pack, which gives you a floating console, a central armrest with storage and an electric parking brake with auto hold. You also have to have RS line trim if you want to be able to order the larger 10-inch TFT instrument cluster screen. On to aesthetics. Unless you want your Clio Hybrid in solid glacier white, you'll be paying your dealer more for your choice of colour. There are 5 metallic options, but it might be worth finding a fraction more for one of these slightly more eye-catching Renault ID metallic paint shades. We've got one of those here, it's Valencia Orange. You could also add a shark fin style roof antenna, an underbody welcome light and illuminated door sills. On to practicalities. Now you're going to want to pay extra for a spare wheel unless you want to be stuck by the side of the road fiddling with a tyre repair kit the next time you have a puncture. You can also specify a mud flap pack, a protection pack, an alarm, rubber floor mats, 2 kinds of boot liner and a boot sill protector. A Kenwood dash cam is available, and you can also add in the quick fix roof bars, which will enable you to add the optional 380 litre roof box. On to safety features. Now, it almost goes without saying that this car, like others in its segment, achieved a 5-star rating in Euro NCAP tests. But that doesn't tell the whole story. To give you just one example, the rival Ford Fiesta, which also achieved a 5-star rating, achieved respective adult, child and safety assistance ratings of 87, 84 and 60%, which sounds fairly reasonable until you learn that this Clio's ratings in each of those areas were respectively 96, 89 and 75%. And that's a difference perhaps large enough to be significant, particularly if you'll be using this car for family transport. Part of the reason why this 5th generation Clio managed to achieve those results lies with its impressive levels of camera safety provision. As you'd expect from a new model in this day and age, autonomous braking is included across the range as standard. This AEBS active emergency braking system is bolstered by the latest cyclist and pedestrian detection functionality. All Clios also get lane departure warning and lane keep assist, which work together on the highway to alert you if you're drifting out of your lane, and if you don't respond, will apply subtle steering correction to ease the car back to where it ought to be. There is also traffic sign recognition. Now that pictures the speed signs you pass and then displays them on the dash. As I mentioned earlier, the 2 top models also get a headlight auto high beam feature too. Otherwise, safety provision is limited to pretty standard stuff. All models get twin front, side and curtain airbags, although no driver's knee bag, plus the usual electronic aids for braking, traction and stability control. Isofix child seat fastenings, tyre pressure monitoring and hill start assist to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions are all additional features that make the team sheet. It's just as well that the electrified elements of the E-Tech powertrain are so sophisticated, because the combustion engine, which all of that is mated to, really isn't. It's a relatively old-fashioned MPI unit from Nissan, which is used in models that the Renault-Nissan Alliance sells in less advanced Russian and South American markets, and it doesn't feature any kind of turbocharger. Still, when it is mated to all that hybrid tech that we detailed for you in the driving experience section earlier on, it can certainly deliver some eye-catching efficiency stats. And now true, the key figures here are some way off what you might expect for a pricier plug-in hybrid, but Renault reckons, and we concur, that they are more realistic than a PHEV model's claimed readings would be. The WLTP figure for combined cycle fuel economy is 64.2 mpg, and we reckon around 50 to 55 mpg ought to be regularly achievable without too much trouble. The WLTP CO2 reading is 98 grams per kilometre. Renault claims that this E-Tech powertrain is 40% more economical than a conventional combustion engine, but that's not really borne out by the official figures when you sit down and study them alongside those of the ordinary combustion models. For comparison, a base petrol Clio SCE 75 manages 52.3 mpg on the combined cycle and 121 grams per kilometre of CO2. For the more powerful TCE 100 model, the figures are 54.3 mpg and 119 grams per kilometre. For the DCI 85 diesel, the readings are 67.2 mpg and 110 grams per kilometre. Still, this Clio Hybrid does trump all those models when it comes to benefit-in-kind taxation exposure, with its attractive 22% BIK taxation rating. That's much better than you get with a conventional petrol or diesel engine supermini. Arguably more relevant is the question of how this Clio Hybrid's figures stack up against its 2 direct full hybrid supermini segment rivals. The Honda Jazz isn't quite as frugal. It manages 62.8 mpg and 102 grams per kilometre. Figures of the Toyota Yaris Hybrid, helped by its lighter curb weight, improves to 68.9 mpg and 92 grams per kilometre. Overall then, as you can tell from those stats, there's really not much in it between those three. Of course, official figures are one thing, actual day-to-day returns are another. And mindful of this, Renault has provided a variety of e-driving tools to enable Clio Hybrid drivers to get as close as possible to the stated readings. As you drive, you'll have to keep a close eye on this central dial and keep its needle as often as possible in the charge rather than in the power section. You'll also want to make use of these two piano key style drive mode buttons just below the central screen here. Eco uses a more measured mapping of the accelerator pedal and adapted gear changing for the most economical drive. EV, meanwhile, well, that's for slow town traffic, and when that's activated, it prioritises battery electric drive up to about 27 miles an hour, as long as there's sufficient charge. Renault reckons it ought to be possible for a Clio E-Tech owner to drive around town at low speeds in all-electric mode for 80% of the time. On the open road, remember to switch the auto gear lever to its B position so you can maximise regenerative brake energy harvesting and so preserve battery charge. If you get on top of all of that, you'll want to keep an eye on how efficiently the powertrain is working, and there are display options enabling you to do that on both the provided TFT monitors. In the instrument binnacle, there's a selectable screen to the left of the main dial that scrolls between various features. There's a Leaf driving score graphic, a hybrid drive graphic, an MPG readout and a power meter. To the left of this display is a battery status readout. Switch your attention to the centre dash display, and in the car info section you'll find an energy info icon which takes you to a history graph divided into 15, 10 and 5 minute sections. There is also a live readout so you can see in real time what's happening. There's also a list screen option with more useful EV readouts, one for average electric consumption and another for total recuperated energy. You get a 5-year warranty with this car. That's a little better than the 3-year warranty of the Honda Jazz, and it equals the 5-year cover which Toyota provides to Yaris customers. Bear in mind that the final 2 years of Renault's policy restrict you to 100,000 miles. You get 4 years of UK emergency breakdown recovery and 3 years worth of European cover as part of that package. Insurance for all Clio Hybrid variants is rated at Group 12E, and scheduled servicing is every 12 months or 18,000 miles, whichever comes around first. As usual, prepaid servicing plans are available, a 3-year 30,000 mile deal or a 40,000 mile package. Let's be honest, most EU bureaucracy is a bit of a pain in the neck, but without it we wouldn't have cars as efficient as this one. Hybrid is an overused word when it comes to small cars these days. If you take that term to mean what it ought to mean, namely the ability to run independently on electric power and an end result of a really significant gain in efficiency, then most so-called hybrid superminis on sale today aren't really proper hybrids at all, but this one is. Now, developing this kind of powertrain and selling it at realistic money is an enormous automotive challenge, but Renault has risen to it impressively here and meaningfully used its hard-earned F1 technology. That's not easy, which is why at the time of this test, only Toyota and Honda were also offering full hybrid power plants in this segment. We'd hoped this Renault might undercut its Yaris and Jazz rivals on price rather than merely matching the sticker figures, and maybe it still might, either through dealer incentives or perhaps through lower pricing once sales build. Buying or leasing decisions, though, aren't all about price, of course, and your decision here might also be swayed by the fact that this Clio offers a bigger boot than a Yaris and slightly better efficiency than a Jazz. All three, of course, sell for the kind of budget that's likely to be a little more than you might have expected to pay for your next Supermini, even one with 60 mpg economy. If that is the case, then reassure yourself with the fact that the asking figures required here are still way off what you'd need for a plug-in or a full electric small car. On the subject of full electric, it's going to be interesting to see how the Clio Hybrid sells in comparison to the brand's full electric Zoe model. Right here, right now, we can't help thinking that this Clio's electrified solution might be a better option for the majority of ordinary customers. With the short commuting and the school run mileage that Supermini buyers tend to cover, most of them might rarely need to use the engine in a Clio Hybrid anyway. And in summary, well, you could either see this as a small car with needlessly expensive technology, or wonder who wouldn't want a small, economical hatch that borrows its transmission and motor technology from the most up-to-the-minute thinking in F1. One writer describes this Clio Hybrid as the Pepsi Max option in the Clio range. In some ways a compromise solution, but one that still leaves a decent taste in the mouth and is better for us in the long run. There is something in that, and there's a lot to like about what Renault's served up here.